How to create a smooth and stylish animation like Apple. Let me show you how easily it can be replicated. All the materials will be in the description.
In today's video, I'm going to give you 5 side hustles that could easily make you $100,000 in the next year.
First, you need to create a composition with Full HD resolution and 30 FPS. Then I'll add an audio track with the voiceover and create a solid with the color D1, D3, D8. To make the textured background with the gradient, create an ellipse and add a gradient ramp with the colors 004 EFF and 00D 8FF to create a smooth blue gradient. For the floating effect, I'll add turbulent displays and adjust the settings a bit. Amount 1500, size 150. For the offset, create a small animation from -500 at the start to 500 at the end. To make the animation stop being static, hold Alt and click on Evolution, then set the value to time 50. The last effect I'll add is Deep Glow with radius 800 and exposure 0.2. Next, I'll create a transparent panel. To do this, create a rounded rectangle with a size of 1600 by 900 and roundness at 80. For the glass effect, add Gaussian blur with a value of 300 and make this layer an adjustment layer. Then I'll add a small texture on top. To do this, duplicate this layer, turn it back into a shape, remove the effects and add a new effect, Venetian Blinds. Set transition completion to 90% and width to 12. Duplicate it and change the direction to 90 degrees. Also add turbulent displays with amount 20 and size 50. Do the same with evolution, but change time to 30. Pre-compose this layer and create a small mask with feather set to 500. To make the panel stand out more from the background, copy the same layer with the glass effect, remove the effects, make it a shape, and change the color to black. Pre-compose this layer and create a mask like this. Go to the mask settings, check invert, and set feather to 700. Change the opacity of this composition to 5%. Now create an adjustment layer and add Gaussian blur. Animate it from 0 to 35 in the first second. Then back to 0 at second 2. Make a smooth graph. You'll see later why this is needed. The next elements will be 2 texts. The first text will appear at the very beginning and the second at frame 15. Both texts will end at frame 45. The first text will be white with the SF Pro Text bold font at 200 pixels. And the second with the Helvetica Neue light font at 70 pixels. The first text will appear with the foggy effect. Change scale and blur's first value to 50. Set offset from the start of the layer to the end with this graph. For the second text, I will use the blur by word effect. Set blur to 30, open advanced, and animate it over 15 frames. Also, select the keyframes and press F9. To make both texts fade, add the Gaussian blur effect 15 frames before the end, create a keyframe, and add another keyframe for opacity. At the end, change the value to 100 and 0. Select both keyframes and press F9. At the start, set blurriness to 50 and create a sharp graph at the beginning. To make the second text disappear, copy the last 4 keyframes and paste them onto the second text. Next, I'll create a 3D camera and link it to a null. To make it work, I will make all layers 3D. Each next layer must also be 3D. I'll create 4 keyframes on the null for position, X, Y, and Z rotation. At the start, I'll set the third position value to 1500 and Z rotation to -20. At the first second, I'll change these values to minus 700, and 0.5. At the second tool, I want to zoom the camera in, so I'll set position values to 835, 645, minus 200, and XY rotation to 20 and 15. At frame 91, I'll reset the values to default, and at frame 103, I'll slightly zoom the camera in and set the third position value to 500. At frame 164, I'll change the values to 1000, 570, minus 100, and XY rotation to 5 and minus 10. Finally, at the very end, I'll set position to 960, 550, 200, and X rotation to minus 5. For smooth animation, I'll create these graphs, and for the slight zoom towards the center, I'll make the graph sharper at the end. For now, I'll disable the camera, null, and both text layers so they don't get in the way. Next, I'll add icons from the first second to frame 104. For each icon, I need to add a gradient ramp from white to F0, F0, F0. I'll make this diagonal gradient. To make each icon appear, add Gaussian blur, set opacity to 0, and after 30 frames, return it to 100 and set blurriness to 0. The initial blur level will vary because the icon sizes are different. For a more beautiful effect, I'll set the keyframes per F9 and add a small position animation from bottom to top over 30 frames. To avoid all icons appearing at the same time, I'll set a 7-frame distance between each icon. "15 frames before the end, add position keyframes to all icons, and at the end, move them to the center. Also use this graph to make them move faster at the end. Pre-compose everything, then add Diplo with radius 700 and exposure 0.1. But that's not all. 10 frames before the end, create a keyframe for exposure and change it to 0.5 at the end. Also, add Gaussian blur and check the box, set a keyframe 15 frames before the end, and change the value to 30 at the end. Make these graphs. Now I'll create the text from frame 55 to frame 92. It will use the SF Pro Text light font at 80 pixels. The animation will also be blur by word, but the blur will be 15. I'll offset the animation over 30 frames, but for the first 10 frames, I'll shift it left. The disappearance will also use Gaussian blur and opacity, a simple 15-frame animation where blurriness goes from 0 to 30. Now I'll create an animation for counting money. For this, I'll create a text that says 0, I'll trim it to a single frame overlapping the precomposition with the icons. Change the font to SF Compact Display Semi-Bold and set the size to 300 pixels. For animation, I'll use the angle control effect. Then open the text parameters, link them to the effect using the spiral. To animate with the $sign, I'll hold Alt, click on the stopwatch next to source text and paste this code. You can find it in the description. To animate from 0 to 100K, click the stopwatch next to angle and at frame 166, set angle to 277 and 280. I'll create this graph for the animation. Next, I'll add Gaussian blur, set the value to 20 and check the box and animate it over 20 frames from 20 to 0 with this sharp animation at the start. I'll also add dip glow, set radius to 800 and animate exposure from 0.5 to 0.2 over 15 frames. I'll use the same graph. At the beginning, I'll set scale to 85 and at frame 163, I'll set it to 95. Select the keyframe and press Ctrl-Shift F9. I'll also create 2 keyframes for radius and exposure. After 3 frames, I'll change the value to 500 and 0.8, and after 15 frames, I'll return the values to their original state and use this graph. After another 3 frames, I'll set scale to 110. Select the keyframes, press F9 and repeat the graph. From frame 164 to the end, I'll create another text with the SF Pro Text light font at 80 pixels. Move the cursor a little further and place it under the number to the right. Initially, I'll create a small appearance using position, Gaussian blur and opacity. Just watch what I do and follow along. Now I can turn on null, camera and the 2 texts again. The last layer will be an adjustment layer with fast lens blur. Set quality to sharper, iris scale to 10, scale X and Y to 50, and in iris settings, set iris shape to circle. At the beginning, I'll animate this scale from 10 to 0 in 1 second, then add a small animation with significant camera movements. Just follow me. To adjust the 3D layers, choose Custom View 1 instead of Active Camera. In the first second, move the first 2 texts slightly closer to the camera. Before we move on to the final step of the animation, I recommend checking out my free 15-minute video. In it, I'll show you how to level up your editing skills in just 30 days and share some cool tips. Link in the description. The last thing to do is enable motion blur on all layers except the $100K layer. Also go into the pre-compositions and enable it there too. The final animation is ready.
In today's video, I'm going to give you 5 side hustles that could easily make you $100,000 in the next year.
Now you know how to make animations in the style of Apple. In my opinion, it turned out to be very similar to Apple's style. Write a comment on how you like the animation and what you like about it. Thanks for watching and see you soon.